adoption of the minutes of the April 27th. Got it. The April 27th meeting. Do I have a motion for adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting? Michael, second. Martin, all in favor. And we are unanimous. We have no public with us tonight. So moving on then to detached secondary suite minimum lot size review and the land use bylaw. I see that this is going out to the public, Daniel, soon.
Yes.
According to the undercurrent. This is going to be an interesting one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
Yeah. So I guess I probably haven't sort of followed the whole journey of this. What was the impetus to remove the lot size component? Maybe you want to even go through the whole process.
I was going to say, well, would you like a presentation on that question?
Yeah, let's have a presentation since we've got the planner here. The whole thing.
Okay. So referred to the APC as Bylaw 581, which changes regulations for detached secondary suites and just accessory residential units in general. There we go. Okay. So in October of last year, Council held a committee of the whole with the Housing Advisory Committee to look at a number of recommendations brought by the Housing Advisory Committee. And one of the actions from that meeting was a recommendation to review minimum lot size regulations for detached secondary suites. So in January, staff brought a report that had been referred to regarding changes to the minimum lot size. And so the APC, when I met with you in, I believe in March, you recommended removal of the minimum lot size. So in April, staff came back to council. Council gave direction to remove the minimum lot size. And additionally, a change recommended by staff to prohibit residential guest accommodation, which is a short-term rental of a dwelling, in an accessory residential use, which is a secondary suite, either attached or detached. In May 24th, council gave first reading to the bylaw and referred it to the Housing Advisory Committee, sorry, and it got cut off there, but to the Housing Advisory Committee, the APC, and to public open houses. So just in terms of an overview, so currently the land use bylaw permits this use called accessory residential use, which we define as a secondary suite, either attached or detached. And it has these 5 points of regulations. And so I've highlighted in orange the bits that would change. So one is the maximum floor area of 115 square meters. And the fourth point being that the minimum lot size of a detached secondary suite currently requires 0.36 hectares, which is about 9/10 of an acre. And Bylaw 581 would make 3 changes to those regulations. So it would remove the minimum lot size for detached secondary suites. It would increase the maximum floor area permitted to 140 square meters, which is about 1,500 square feet. And it would prohibit the use of an accessory residential unit, so a secondary suite, from being used as a residential guest accommodation. So in essence, it would replace those previous 5 points with new 5 points, where the 0.3 is the same formula for floor area, but it would go to a maximum of 140 square meters. And the point number 4, which was the minimum lot size, would be removed and replaced with a new point, which would prohibit the residential guest accommodation use. So in terms of the maximum floor area, this was a change that council had directed staff to bring or had discussed for staff to bring sort of an overview on what the change would be. And then at that May 24th meeting, council directed staff to include this change. So it would increase the maximum floor area for a detached secondary suite to 140 square meters, but keep the overall formula the same. So currently the way it works is that you get a set amount and it goes up by percentages. So that if you are a 0.8 hectare lot or a 2 acre lot, essentially you hit the maximum of 115 square meters, which is about 1,200 square feet. And this would keep the formula the same, but increase the maximum. So now you would hit the maximum of 140 square meters or about 1,500 square feet when you reach 1.2 hectares or 3 acres in size. So that was council's direction, thinking that if you're on a larger lot, they wanted to permit the option for people to build larger detached secondary suites. The other piece that's included is this piece on prohibiting the residential guest accommodation use. So yeah, has had a fair amount of discussion already, but currently our land use bylaw, as of 2020, we allow this accessory use of a residential guest accommodation. So the accessory use of a dwelling unit or a portion of one ordinarily occupied as a residence as temporary accommodation for paying guests for a period of less than 30 days. So short-term rental or people Airbnb typically fall under this use, or sometimes a bed and breakfast use, which is a different permitted use in our land use bylaw. But so staff's interpretation of this definition and this use is that the use of a dwelling solely as an RGA with no normal occupant is not consistent with the permitted use in the land use bylaw. So the crucial bit being that the use is permitted if it's ordinarily occupied as a residence, so that people, who are looking to make a dwelling available as a short-term rental unit with no normal occupant, and they're seeking it purely as a sort of commercial operation, that would not be consistent with our permitted use. So of the licensed RGAs on Bowen, 13 are in attached suites, 7 are in detached suites, and 27 are in primary dwellings. And so in reviewing regulations for increasing or decreasing lot size for detached secondary suites, increasing ways that they can be permitted, concerns were raised by staff through the process that the provision of detached secondary suites will not contribute to providing rental housing if the suites are instead used as RGA units. And just flagging here, staff are aware of instances when unlicensed RGAs cannot meet current bylaw requirements. So quite often that's the parking requirements. When they're sort of informed of the regulations required and the licensing requirements, that they will instead offer them as a long-term rental unit. And then my last point is just on the development permit guidelines. So when we talked about removing the minimum lot size, we talked about the need to potentially review our current development permit guidelines. And one of the things we noted is that the current guidelines have this clause that detached secondary suite needs to establish and maintain privacy with respect to the adjacent lots through the location and orientation of decks, external stairs, doors, windows, balconies, and being sensitive to existing development on adjacent lots. So what I told council is that this guideline exists, but currently with the regulations, it doesn't come into play very often. So often when we allow detached secondary suites, they're on larger lots and they try to be exempt from the DP requirements altogether, which means they're 30 meters away from the property line. So it's not something that is typically, reviewed that strenuously, because you can do a site visit and determine, okay, there's nothing, there's no chance of it impacting privacy because it's so far from any adjacent dwelling. But as we move to remove minimum lot size and potentially have detached secondary suites closer to property lines and closer to neighbors, that this guideline would be something we'd be looking to more closely and looking for more information in an application about how it's achieving that in any application. So that was the end of my presentation, and then that's just the recommendation that's in the agenda. So looking for a recommendation from the APC on the proposed changes.
There was an interim step in that process, was there not, where staff were considering the possibility of a reduction in the minimum lot size, not an elimination of it?
Yeah.
And what happened with that?
In essence, we had brought to council in January sort of a procession and said, okay, here's the impact of reducing it in size to a set amount and a set amount below that, and how many properties would that impact? And then in part because both you as the APC and the Housing Advisory Committee both recommended that it not be a reduction, but it just be removed. And so council followed that recommendation from both committees and said, okay, we'll just remove the minimum lot size rather than reduce it to a set amount.
Okay. So, I mean, interestingly, there's the removal of the minimum lot size, but there's an potential increase in floor area.
Yeah.
As well. And that I didn't work that formula. I didn't work the formula through, yeah. But to achieve the 1,500 square feet, you need how large a property?
A 3-acre property.
Ah. Okay.
So the interesting thing about the formula is that when you are lower than an acre in size, you are permitted essentially less than 90 square meters. So currently you can build an attached, any size lot can build an attached secondary suite of 90 square meters. If you're less than an acre in size, the floor area for your detached secondary suite is less than 90 square meters. So you could build it larger if it's part of your house and if it's detached. And then as you get larger than that, your incentive is now to build a detached secondary suite because it can be larger.
Right. At 1,500 square feet, it's hardly a suite anymore.
Big.
We're now measuring floor area to the inside face of exterior walls, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's livable, heated space.
Yeah.
So that's potentially a house that's well over 1,600 square feet. I say house because it's bigger than our house.
Yeah, but it's on 3 acres, so it's not exactly
That's true.
gonna covering too much of the lot.
No. So there,
It's
I guess there are three points here. And I guess my question would be, should we look at each one of them individually and see, if, do we check or do we try to look at them together? I'm not sure. There's 2 of them that are bylaw changes and one is an enforcement issue. Which, I mean, you can say whatever you want in a bylaw, but that's not necessarily, enforcement is something else. So I guess the first one is the minimum lot size question, which we spoke to before. Do anybody have any comments about that particular? All still good?
Yeah.
I think actually Kirsty makes an interesting point. I mean, if you need 3 acres for a 1,500 square foot dwelling, nobody would balk at 2 1.5 acre properties, each with a 1,500 square foot dwelling on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, that chart is very helpful, Daniel. Thanks. But no, I haven't changed my mind.
Okay. Martin, do you have any comments about that?
No.
Okay. So, and then the other is the sort of the formulaic increase of suite size, which once you describe it, Daniel, it's not really an increase of suite size, only after you get to larger properties than we've been contemplating, then you can build more.
Yeah, so it's easy to sort of think of them combined and think like now they can be on any, a small lot can now have 1,500 square foot detached secondary suite, but it's not the case. It just happens to be both changes. But yeah, it would affect properties larger than 2 acres, would then be able to increase in up to 3 acres to hit that maximum.
Right. So then the third one is the prohibition of short-term rental. This, I think it was Fritz Perls who said the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And there's a real good intention in here, which is to provide housing. And in part, that's dependent on enforcement, on policing, on ensuring that when a detached secondary dwelling is constructed, it's used for long-term rental. And it's interesting, we've been in some conversations with friends just very recently about this in a more general sense. I'm curious, and Michael, maybe you can speak to this. My impression as a one-time renter was that landlords don't have the carte blanche right to simply throw a tenant out when they decide that they want to rent their cottage for the 2 months of the summer for $400 a night. The conditions for asking a tenant or requesting or requiring a tenant to vacate are quite difficult. If I'm not mistaken.
That's the provincial legislation. It's not municipal, but yeah,
I understand that.
Tenants are quite well protected in Canada.
They certainly are.
I mean, it used to be that you could do a fixed term lease, and so you have a fixed term lease with a fixed eviction date. Yeah, and then the tenant would have to leave, and you could do something else
Yeah,
with the
but-
property
but
and then
the-
have a new
the-
fixed lease, but now it carries over and you need to evict by cause at the end of it. So
Yeah.
tenants' use of the property, major renovation, immediate family use of the property.
I guess we don't have any real data that would predict that these units would be rented out long term, right? We don't know. We just don't know. You've heard some stories, or
Yeah, I don't think we have a definitive, accounting. We have who is licensed right now. So what's licensed right now in terms of suites? The biggest question mark I think we have in terms of data is just the number of secondary suites on Bowen. So we would have, and I provided for council in the past, like the number that have been permitted since, detached secondary suites since we started counting, since we permitted them in 2017. But, primarily the secondary suites on Bowen, a lot of them predate 2008 when we allowed them.
yeah, I don't know. I'm not optimistic, but I guess the bottom line on this is that if you don't do it, then you've taken away some of the housing stock. And if you do it, then at least you're giving the chance, the opportunity to create.
I can't imagine people building a house a suite to rent with the tenancy laws. I certainly wouldn't.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of these secondary suites are going to be what we used to call nanny suites or granny suites.
For family or.
But still, that does add to the housing stock, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't know. Anecdotally, I can say, I know a number of people. I've known a number of people over the dozen years we've been here who were renters, and quite a number of them found themselves looking for somewhere new to move to in June because they were being told they had to leave, and which is why I bring in the provincial legislation. I know that there's no municipality who can enforce that, but it's a bit challenging. It's kind of like, it's sort of dual purposing, right? It's like, we'll take the long-term rental, which is, over the winter because that's what we can get. But as soon as we can rent our place, on a daily or weekly basis for much more, then we're certainly going to do that.
I know, and that's problematic because summer is when accommodation becomes a real issue for the
Exactly.
on island workers and so on.
Right.
But we also need to have overnight accommodation on the island, I believe, and we have no zoning that allows it. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Well, I'm not sure that that's quite true. Some of there are lawful ways to have bed and breakfasts and retreat centers and a variety of other uses, which, lawfully you can rent out for periods of up to 30 days. So I think there are some incentives that are there.
So if this doesn't solve the housing issue, does it make it worse? I don't see how it could.
No, I don't know that it makes it any worse, David. Sorry, Michael.
I'm flattered.
I think this is I sort of come up against this, particularly in because I work in the construction field. It's costing $400 a square foot to build a residence now, and that actually scales up when the building scales down. So it's probably closer to $500 a square foot to build a 1,200 square foot cottage in your backyard. You would undoubtedly do that for family or so on. Would you do that with the hope of eventually over the next decade recovering your money and sort of to make a profit by renting it to locally? I don't know. So I don't know how big an incentive it really is to get housing for people who are looking for rental accommodation on Bowen. Having said that, I'm not sure. I don't know that I'm necessarily against it, but I'm not sure that this is really the way to get the housing.
Well, it can't be the only thing.
Clearly
done.
not. Yeah.
You know, you can't always have steak, but if somebody offers hot dogs, you get to eat.
That's right. Um,
Don't
Yeah,
put
I mean,
that in the minutes, Stefania.
yeah, exactly.
I see you plotting.
It's a very interesting analogy.
So
Yeah, and I mean, to Kirsty's point, I think, you know, having more zoning that might allow for multifamily, where appropriate, you know, that's something else. At any rate.
I guess coming at it from a different direction is this only to provide rental accommodation for people that want rental accommodation, or is that what everything we're doing on the island, or is this to allow people that own property to put another building up for their kid, for their parent, for their cousin, whatever? Like, we seem to be driving every decision that we do, every direction is all about rental accommodation. And shouldn't we be thinking about the people that own the property and what they might want to do as well? Like, I just, they're the taxpayers. And I think that, you know, it's all very apple pie to be looking at trying to figure out how to have more rental accommodations and prevent short-term rentals. But it's, I
I
think there's anything in this that prevents you from building a suite.
No, it isn't. It's just that we look at things so bad.
And you know what? That's an accommodation issue too. I mean, you often hear about, well, I am of an age where people are beginning to have to look after their parents. You know, turnabout is fair play, I guess. So that's a housing issue too.
Yeah.
They want their parents nearby. So this helps with that as well.
It does, and I think actually it helps with that more.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I think that it's baked into it. This is a good thing from a familial perspective, from a perspective of aging in place, of, you know, of doing a good quality densification, all of those things. I think it's baked right into it. It's simple. It's the question. The other part of the question is about whether this is a method, a way to provide lower income or rental housing on Bowen, and I think it's probably not.
Yeah. Anyway, it's not that I disagree with doing it. I just would like us to sometimes talk about what are we going to do to allow the property owners to do things to help them. You know, it's just the way we talk about it.
Yeah. I think, though, I'm always aware that we are not the legislative body. We're not the politicians here. Would it be a bridge too far to say that, you know, we approve of this initiative, but we are not confident that it will go far to solve the rental accommodation issue? I think maybe that's not our mandate.
Right.
I think all of us personally feel that way, but.
Yes.
Right.
So
does Martin say anything, Drew?
I'm sorry.
I just kind of, when you said we all feel that way, it kind of put a red flag for me because we hadn't heard from Martin yet. Okay.
I support this initiative. I'll say that much.
Do you think it will help provide additional rental accommodation?
Honestly, no, I don't think so. I mean, I do agree with Drew here, but you know, there are definitely economics involved. You know, inversely, I think that the situation that we're facing as a community is really driven by, you know, renters are displaced most often probably through sales of properties, and given the hot market, I think a lot of people have been displaced directly for that reason. So, you know, but obviously that's not something any of us can address in any way. It's real estate, and So, but yeah, I support.
And I support it, but with saying that I think, and yes, it's not gonna, but I think not gonna improve rental accommodation, but I still think it's the right thing to do for this island because owners have other issues beside developing rental accommodation for the island. They have personal desires to have other things. So I think it's a very positive thing. I'd like to say very positive as opposed to just we're okay with it, but maybe you guys aren't.
Yeah, I was just playing with some numbers here, but if you pay $600,000 to build a 1,500 square foot property and you want to get 5% return, which is a very modest return from a property investment, you're going to have to charge $30,000 a year in rent, $2,500 a month. Ouch.
Mhm.
And that
That's
doesn't
not-
pay costs, yeah.
I was gonna say, Michael, that sounds better than when I was looking for rental last year. Like in terms of the market on Bowen, that's
Oh,
that's
okay.
pretty competitive.
Oh, I know, but it's still a lot of money for, anyway,
Yes, it is.
okay. So do you need a motion then that we, I
Mhm.
don't think, do we have any comments to make? I don't think we do we?
No,
Not that we want
I
to,
think I'm sensing just a general support here. What do you have, Steph?
well, I can show you. I kind of divvied it out into the three in order to get ready for some comments, but not so many. So maybe I'll just go back to the original. So, can you see my screen?
We see that
No.
you're sharing your screen, but it's black.
Yeah.
Thinking.
Getting ready for the great reveal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
suspense is building.
That it?
Here we go.
There.
Okay, so I have here that the commission support land use bylaw 57, amendment 581, and then in brackets, just a description of what happened there. And then I had to provide the following comments. So then I've got minimum lot size, no objections. The development permit guidelines, more rigorous enforcement, no objections. And the guest accommodation use prohibition, I had that you support it, but you weren't convinced that this would end up with long-term housing stock. But it sounds like you don't want that in anymore.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether I'm not sure that we need the individual points. I think we can
Yeah, okay.
simply
There's
be
nothing in
supportive
that.
of.
Okay, so we'll just
Mhm.
see, Daniel, you don't need anything about the development permit guidelines
No,
being
that's fine.
more, no, okay.
okay, and then just,
All that work for nothing.
Yeah.
then supports, you need an S on the end of that for the grammar.
I don't because it starts with, it was moved
Oh, okay,
and
that.
seconded that, so it's a subjunctive
Oh, I
tense.
see, okay.
Sorry,
Mm.
yeah,
So
thank you.
is someone going to move and second that?
Well, if you put the S on the end of supports, I'll move it. No.
Okay, here
And
we
only
go.
then.
Oh, I don't know, doesn't, am I the only one that,
No, it's fine. I like it with support.
Because here, it'll go like this. It was moved and seconded that the Advisory Planning Commission support. That's how it goes, but it's okay.
that's fine, that's fine. I see,
That's our-
I see your point now about support. Okay,
This is just rough anyways. I'll clean it up later. What about the housing crisis? Who's gonna vote?
All right. All right. Do I have a mover?
well, I'll move it after
All
my
right.
being an asshole on it.
No, Michael, that's too harsh. And seconder? Martin, all in
Another
favor?
MP.
All in favor?
Kirsty?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we are unanimous.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
That was scary.
Ah,
So moving on to item 4.2, and this is where David actually should be here, I think, but because isn't this his?
actually, you're
this-
right. You know what? I'm gonna put myself on mute and give him a call. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think
Conservation.
I don't think he's home, actually. Why do we have this again, Daniel? That's my question.
In short, because I redrafted it, so I wanted to bring it back to the APC. Yeah.
You redrafted it.
Why are we needing it? Just as a back.
Well, do you want a presentation on that question, or do you want a shorter version?
I'll,
Be honest, Kirsty.
It has to do with
Probably need
consistency
a-
with the OCP and the Islands Trust, and
I guess I would say in terms of background, it's like, when this council was elected, one of their goals was to develop a conservation development policy and task the APC with that mission. And you produced a report and a draft policy for council. And it got referred out to basically all of our committees, who all provided like a very thorough review and good, but like lots and lots of comments. And so we brought that to council to a meeting that kept getting postponed because of other things. And we eventually got in front of council in February of this year. And essentially took all the comments to council and said, okay, let's try to scale it back to what the essence of this policy is intended to be, as a sort of that first step of conservation development policy. And in part, it was looking at how many policies we have in the OCP already that speak to elements of conservation development. So the goal of protecting green space in developments and clustering development, so that we use less of the land and protect some of it and set it aside as protected. And so council then directed staff to essentially draft a revised policy that was more simply focused on rezoning applications and about trying to guide council, and then by extension guide applicants and staff in terms of what to look for in a rezoning application. So the policy, as it is drafted now and went to council, is to apply to rezoning applications outside of the Snug Cove village. And it's to guide council in terms of implementing policies that exist in the OCP to promote cluster development and protect sensitive areas.
The actual policy is really in the guidelines, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you want me to put it up on? Is that easier? I can talk to it, or I can essentially talk through the policy.
Here comes David. Hello, David. Hello, David. Looks like he was running.
I missed this in my schedule.
Well, it's all right. You're just in perfect time. We're talking about conservation development policy.
Yeah, okay. I guess Daniel will present.
Yeah, he's putting it all over to you. No.
So would you like me to essentially just go through the policy and as it stands and what's in it, and then we could discuss after that? Or does the APC just have things they want to talk about at this point or without even me going through it?
Yeah, are you asking me, Daniel? No.
I was sort of asking Drew if he had,
okay.
or any members, if they had a preference. I generally come with a presentation, but I don't need to give it if
right.
If you feel like you already know it.
I would be interested, because you said that you've kind of reworked it, and I'd kind of like to know. I guess it is a policy. I would like to hear. It is a policy, so it doesn't have the weight, if you will, to preclude if provincial legislation, for instance, if the municipal act, I presume it would be the municipal act, allows a 10 acre lot development, this policy could not empower the municipality to say, no, you can't do that.
No, this would apply specifically to people seeking rezoning.
Okay. So, but if you needed a rezoning to achieve your 10 acre lot, then this would come into play.
And in a sense, I view it almost as guiding some of the policies and objectives in the OCP. So the OCP says, we don't want strip development. We want to protect green space. We want to see development clustered. And this is saying, okay, let's further elaborate on this. And like, this is how council is choosing to interpret those policies and objectives when it comes to rezoning applications.
Right.
I ask, where did the one thing that, and maybe I forgot it from before, but where does the nature needs half notion come from?
I think that came from the various council discussions bringing it forward as a goal.
Okay.
And that was part of that was my prompting for council, in that as we've been developing a conservation development policy and brought some rezoning applications forward, like the one a few years ago for the Nectar Yoga rezoning application. In terms of, in that application, it was council's pretty explicit goal of having 50% of the land protected as park.
Okay.
And so my guidance for council was that if council has a number in mind and a target in mind, have it in the policy that that's the target, so that people are clear. Versus if you just say, well, we want to protect as much as possible, but you actually have a target in mind. When people come, you say, well, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah. Well, that is one thing about this that is very concrete. A lot of it is subject to judgment and evaluation, but 50% is 50%.
And I could speak to that a little bit. I mean, there's really an international movement around nature needs half as sort of the recognition that nature is being threatened, and that's sort of an easy way of getting the idea across that we need to protect nature in a significant way. It's also in the Metro Vancouver. One of the goals in Metro Vancouver, the new regional growth strategy, is protecting the idea nature needs half comes in, and it's to protect at least half of the region, or the natural areas, and at least half of the region to keep them protected. So it comes from there, but it also comes, it goes back here about probably 20 years when John Reed started some rezonings and was kind of protecting half, 50%, and it sort of kind of set a pattern in that way. And so that's sort of been in several councils' minds over the last 2 decades, I guess I'd say.
Okay. No, I really like it, actually. I just was wondering where it came from. And I think, for example, at the Grafton Lake development, there's a whole bunch of water that we don't have to worry about it being developed. And it does occur to me that on a lot of the larger parcels on Bowen, half is just not developable anyway. But what I worry about with this is that the half that's not developed has no natural value. It might just be bare rock face or something like that, or but anyway, that was just the one thing that struck me as being different from the work that Dennis Wilson had done. Sure miss him in this discussion, actually, but anyway, okay.
There are, Michael, just to that point, there are other provincial measures that are requirements for development, where the environmental assessments that have to be done, and watersheds that need to be protected, and wetlands that need to be protected, and that kind of thing. So it's not all on the shoulders of the municipality to ensure that that important riparian areas, for instance, are protected as part of a development and are part of that 50%, because they are already protected by the legislation.
Yeah, actually, when we were working on this before, was it Pender Island? One of the islands has classified all its land as to its natural value. And so if you buy this parcel of land, you know what the classification is, and you know it's wetlands or whatever. But yeah, okay.
There is a definition in here, and the green space is defined in the policy.
Yeah.
Right above the signature lines. So it's defined as anything valuable for educational, scientific, recreational, aesthetic qualities, and may include trails, parks, reserves, natural forest, wetlands, and any other land set aside for such a purpose
Okay.
through agreement.
But the green space doesn't have to be in the 50%. I guess that's my one concern.
Isn't that?
Although it does talk about preservation of green space and environment,
Yeah.
so maybe the overall policy covers that.
I mean, it's kind of loose in there as a defined term, but
okay.
I think how I
don't know
see
how
it,
one would make it more strict.
is the goal 50% is set aside. And then, the policy has definitions for both green space and then environmentally sensitive area. Both of which definitions are just taken from the OCP.
Okay.
But it's the goal being that areas identified as environmentally sensitive areas would be given priority. So it's like, if there's going to be 50% provided,
Okay.
the goal is anywhere identified as a sensitive area is protected, and then green space, which again is defined.
That there are so many other factors involved that we can't list them all. But if I remember the nectar yoga thing, what was key there was that we wanted to preserve an area that was immediately adjacent to another natural area of the neighboring landowner, right? Just to create a. But I guess that's for the planners and council when they get the advice.
Right. Yeah, and same with like the policy says, which is similar to how you drafted it, not specific in terms of saying like it needs to be dedicated as park or it needs to be protective covenant, but the idea being that would be something that would be determined in each application.
People to be creative, and every developer will have a different idea.
And then I had one specific question for the APC that came up at the council meeting that I thought was a good question from council, and wanted to hear the APC's thoughts. So currently the policy says it's for all rezoning applications outside of Snug Cove Village. And council's question was essentially like, well, does that mean any rezoning application? Like if it's a business outside Snug Cove that's altering, maybe the permitted uses, they're tweaking the permitted uses, or they're altering, something minor like that. They're like surely that doesn't mean that that this policy would apply. And we would expect that half the land be dedicated because that they are, altering their use or something. And I said, no, I would think that's beyond what the policy intends to do, but right now it just says, all rezoning applications. So I was trying to think about what would be appropriate and wanted to hear if the APC had any thoughts on that in terms of, should the policy be limited in some way, or is that in fact, what the policy is going after?
Yeah. Well, what we're really going after is rezoning applications that will have an effect on nature.
Mm-hmm.
So will this will apply to the municipal lands as well then?
But if somebody wants to change from, say, being a cidery to being a cannabis farm, I guess that would affect nature, wouldn't it? That example. But the little tweaking that you talk about, Daniel, is unlikely to affect the natural environment.
Yeah.
If it really is. So that would be the one comment I would make in answer to that question.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in here about parcel size.
No.
So if you have a 1 acre parcel and you want to change the zoning from, I don't know, SR2 to industrial, then you're going. Well, there was a previous council who was looking at some just outside of the cove, some industrial zoning, and so I mean, I suppose it's a real possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And does nature get half of that, or how does that work?
I know. I mean, I've said to council, I brought it up. It does get more challenging. Like it's easier when you're thinking of something, the scale of like the Grafton Lake development or some of the other, larger subdivisions we've seen.
Right.
But you can more easily draw a map and say, okay, half, and there's still half left. And the more challenging ones are when I've talked to people who have essentially like long, skinny lots with that existing house at the end and a driveway. and a septic field and a well and whatever else. And if they are looking to rezone so they could divide into two, right, it gets more challenging to say half of the land will be protected because
So if you
you know,
were,
it's not in its natural state already.
if you were to recommend a parcel size, and I like the idea, what size would you choose? 10 acres?
Was that, I don't know if I would recommend,
Okay.
because even if it was, you know, yeah, it kind of depends on the lot even. Like if it was a vacant 2-acre lot that's next, you know, next to existing parks or next to trail networks, and the rezoning application became okay, instead it's going to be 2 half-acre lots and a 1-acre park dedication. Like that could be useful.
Yeah, I think lot size is not really a applicable metric. I mean, really, I think we're talking about protecting green space that is there, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously we're looking at something that has value as a green asset that we want to protect.
In whose eyes?
Well, that's where the definition should come in. But yeah, it's kind of a nebulous
Yeah,
thing.
that's the thing with this. It's kind of prescriptive, but it's very nebulous. And definitely if people trying to rezone to just, you know, change the commercial use or something, that doesn't make any sense that this should be involved.
Yeah.
So I guess I
David,
have a problem with my description, but
David, do you have any comments on any of this discussion that's been going on?
I mean, I agree that the policy is, I guess, nebulous. I mean, it's a pretty light touch in that there's not a heck of a lot of detailed definitions, and part of that is a recognition. I guess I'm speaking for myself here, but I think this came up in a couple of the council discussions, that the situations can really vary with lot size and with, you know, what's actually going on here and in what the rezoning might involve. So there's a fair bit of judgment involved, but the idea of, okay, we're trying to protect, well, first of all, you've got to look at the area and look at the natural area and do what you can to protect that, and through clustering development and looking at protecting at least half. So, I mean, that's pretty general, but it can be applied reasonably well in many circumstances. In some, it would just not, you know, some of the things that we're just talking about, where you're just looking at a changed use in a fairly small lot, there's really not much opportunity to do this. But that's kind of why it's staying at a high level. Some of the council pushback back, you know, this is a couple of years ago really, was that when you get down into the details and you try to have the details in the policy, it just runs aground too many times with special cases. So that's kind of why it's stayed at a pretty high and general level. But I admit that does leave it open quite a bit for interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my impression is that the objectives are laudable. It's a question of application, really. Is there, does the onus fall onto the planning staff to determine, you know,
Well, it does, yes.
what it does and interpret it? And
I mean, I guess I would say planning staff in terms of reviewing an application, but ultimately council.
Yeah, but ultimately council, that's right.
because the trigger is rezoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a unknown risk, you know, just thinking from the perspective of property owners. You know, if someone is, for example, buying a property with the mindset of developing it through a rezoning, they may not really see this as something that would even factor into their pro forma. Has the possibility of predefining areas as part of the policy been looked at? You know, like just kind of having a survey of the island and identifying areas that would be desirable.
That would be an interesting thing to do, but that would be a very big job that we don't have the resources to do right now. And maybe down the road, that would be some nice work.
I guess I would say what we do have is like our OCP and our parks plan have areas of identified like future park desired, and then our OCP has environmentally sensitive areas mapped from now, you know, as old as our OCP, so 2010.
Yeah.
But so we do use those currently in terms of like rezoning applications and evaluating the applications and if there are potential sensitive areas or you know, desired parks. And so, you know, we would continue to probably use those as initial review tools to bring into council and say, this is what the OCP is looking for. And in terms of sort of risk for applicants or future, you know, people looking to rezone, like absent this policy, our OCP already speaks to like, if you're rezoning in a rural area, you know, we seek amenity contributions as part of a rezoning, and part of the amenity contribution can be provision of green space, provision of parks, trails, et cetera. So in a sense, this is, you know, this is spelling it out more clearly, and especially the goal for wanting half of it. But, you know, I would hope it's not foreign to anyone seeking to rezone already that this is something that we are looking for.
Does the municipality take cash in lieu?
It's an option in our OCP that is potential. I mean, I think traditionally on Bowen is that the vast majority of rezonings, people are more willing to give up land than give up cash. But I mean, that probably changes as you get into smaller lots.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kirsty, I'm just going to finish this thought. Because I have a project right now over on Pender Island, and they have quite an extensive DPA program over there, where they have way more DPAs than we have, and identifying those areas is really helpful. Like, we knew going into this, my clients have this property, and we knew that there was a riparian, or not a riparian, a wetland DPA on one part of it, and intertidal on the shore that would impact development in certain ways. It takes that risk away that Martin was alluding to. You know when you're going in, well, we're going to have to address this. So I feel like mapping and identifying areas on the island where this policy would apply would be really useful.
Yeah, so it was Pender Island then I was thinking of earlier.
I think it was, yeah,
okay.
Because
I read these guidelines, and I one of the things I think, I don't want to discourage development. I just want to make sure that it happens in a particular way. But I read these guidelines, and I'm a developer, and I could see myself putting together an application for rezoning that is guided by these guidelines. And in that sense, they're helpful. I also know if I'm going to buy the land, as Martin says, if I buy the land, I have to know at the start that chances are I'm not going to be allowed to develop more than 50% of it.
Right.
So, to that extent, you're involved in it. I mean,
which is why
it may not be perfect, but it's better than.
Right. But that is why it seems to be more valid on a larger parcel.
Yeah. Because
there's still enough of parcel left to develop to actually be meaningful. But
I think it would be a useful comment to make to council that they consider the possibility of I don't know what you characterize it. What did you call DPA? What does that mean? Development permit
that's
area?
Development permit area. I don't know whether it would I don't know, Diana, would you do it as a development permit area or?
But you know what, we could, it doesn't have to be the whole island immediately.
Right.
And maybe it can be done in stages based on what areas are likely to be developed next.
But if we already have the riparian zones are lined out and the wetlands are already known and.
Yeah, a lot of it's done already, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's
A lot of it
already,
is done already.
yeah. So I'm not sure that we need to, environmental assessments always have to be done before you can do anything. So it just seems to me that it's a lot more words that are not necessarily gonna help.
I think it's actually, it's a little bit of a bigger ask in some way, Kirsty, than compliance with the provincial environmental standards. And it's, you know, I think if a John Reed development is a good example because he must comply with those provincial requirements, and yet he's gifting more land for a trail network and things like that as part of the overall development. That you really sense that there is give back, and that the development is you're not going to be looking at that in 20 years and going, oh wow, it's just all built. It's not all built environment. And that's something you won't achieve that by simply relying on the provincial requirements that are in place right now for watersheds and riparian areas. I don't.
Well,
think.
and also we have the OCP, so which
But the,
blabs on about also.
but the OCP is, you know, is a guideline. It's not a requirement
But isn't this a guideline?
so far.
So anyway, that's I just anyway. I think that the only new thing that I've heard is this 50% requirement.
So guidelines typically are true unless there's a good reason they shouldn't be. They're applicable unless there's a good reason not to apply them.
I think one thing the policy does, though, is it consolidates a whole bunch of things. It becomes sort of a one-stop shop. And yet, Kirsty, the 50% is the only thing I noticed that was new too. And I like the exactness of it. I mean, insofar as the developer is going to want to know what they're facing for potential.
But that's very different. Yeah. 50% on a 2-acre lot or a 10-acre lot.
That troubles me, but I'm not sure how we get around that. I like the idea of a parcel restriction, and I would go, you know, more than 2 acres.
Right.
I said 10 because that seems to be the magic number. A lot of subdivision issues, but
I'm just going to speak to the even 2 acres matters. And Daniel was really mentioning it as this is one that was done a little while ago. And okay, so I'm someone who owns some land, and I'm looking to rezone it and change it around a little. But everybody knows that if you're doing a rezoning, it has to go to council. So what happened was, you know, they're looking for some sort of an amenity, and I just thought it wasn't very well done and wasn't really well thought out. This just provides some guidance as to, okay, you know, what do I need to do? Even on a 2 acre, there's some opportunities maybe to connect to other natural areas or trails or whatever it might be. There's some opportunity to add to the keeping Bowen as a place that is you know, mostly forested and or mostly left in its natural state with connections, natural connections, and this sort of is something to help the developer, the owner, look at what kind of an amenity the community will be looking for.
Okay, but I'm not sure. Does that mean you're against having a parcel restriction, David, or?
Yeah, I'm keeping it more
It
open.
does occur to me, if you do 2 acres, I mean, so we don't have the restriction on 2 acres. We've lost an acre of natural land. It's not like the kind of consequence we're dealing with somebody who's got
Right.
500 acres.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I have a problem with the requirement for 50%. So,
Yeah, and
that's
also what
kind
it becomes,
yeah,
whether it's public access or, natural forest left behind, which is not necessarily something that would allow public access onto the property.
Yeah, it's left right
But-
now pretty fluid, right? Other means deemed appropriate by council.
Yeah, it is.
if one were to rezone a 2-acre parcel and for various reasons, only 25% of that land, that parcel of land is something they wanted to give up to this incentive. Presumably that's something they could negotiate with council. I mean, it's not,
Sure.
this is not written in stone, right? They can say, well, there's 25% of this parcel, which is not really conducive to the kind of use that we're proposing anyway. So we're willing to leave that in its natural state. And it actually may be useful in some way. But we don't want to give 50% because it's taking too much away.
And then as a council member, I would say, okay, well, thank you very much. What else are you going to provide for us?
So then, and that's where development cost charges come in. You can balance that out with some DCCs, and we have some money to pay for services and infrastructure.
Yes, and we'll probably be doing quite a bit of work on DCCs in the next little.
There's probably a lot of 1 and 2 acre parcels that have absolutely no natural value at all.
Right. Exactly.
They're already been scraped pretty bare.
Right.
Yeah.
So might be looking for something else.
And I've talked to people sort of at a high level about rezoning applications where, they see that this is a draft and they might say, well, this seems like this would be a challenge, but I'm providing, whatever it may be. They say, okay, I'm providing more than, the amount of affordable housing that's provided, that's asked for in the affordable housing policy, but I'm going to provide less than the amount of protected land in the conservation development policy. And so I say, ultimately that's sort of for council to weigh the balances of, in terms of if an application says, well, it's meeting this policy, but it's not meeting, it's exceeding one policy and it's not meeting another policy target. Ultimately, that's sort of a council then determination of weighing the benefits of a rezoning application.
Yeah, it's not legislative, right? It's just guidance.
Yeah.
So they can, and I noticed the 50% is expressed as a goal rather than a requirement. I'm not sure what difference that makes. A smart developer is going to find 50%. You can have
That's again sort of as I've talked to people about it. Yeah, it's like it's going to be an easier application if you can say 50% of it's provided. But if it's less, then it's that discussion for council. Sorry, what was that, Christy?
Is this donated land or is this covenanted land?
Could be covenanted, it says.
Yeah.
Covenanted or other means deemed appropriate by council.
But then they still have to pay taxes on it. Well, they do.
Well, depends. There's the NAPTEP program through Islands Trust is a program so that you covenant land, and so you have reduced property tax payments.
Yeah, not as just a nightmare of an opportunity.
Well, they're paying taxes on it already before they seek the subdivision, or the rezoning. But
Yeah, to me, this is a little frightening. my projects are, for the most part, shelters for BC Housing. And these projects often face a lot of opposition from future neighbors in rezonings, basically NIMBYism for the most part. And, you know, councils are often put in a position of, for political reasons, of really having to find any reason they can to derail projects such as shelters. So I see this as something that may be used as a last resort tool to, you know, set aside a contentious project. Just thinking of thinking of it through another lens.
Mhm.
Yeah, in my world, that's a bit of a problem.
It's interesting. So from a slightly different place, I see it. There are other challenges too, particularly on a smaller parcel where there's a whole land use bylaw which talks about lot coverage and perhaps floor area ratio, but lot coverage and the parcel may be small, but the use is such that you can actually cover a lot of that property with required parking and maximize building footprint and things, and you can't give that. And then there's a disincentive to even move forward with doing a development, which whether it's a housing development or whether it's a health center or whatever it is. I'm seeing that, you know, this can be seen because I see the motherhood side of it. I see the importance of it. And I'm wondering if we're trying to paint with too broad a brush over everything to apply this to all properties on the island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, personally, I'd like to see a set of defined features that really this applies to, mapped out.
Well, I think that to me, yeah, the really contentious issues, the rest are all motherhood and apple pie is the 50%. And if the 50% was taken out of it, and that seems to be like a prevention of development to me, and that's where I have a problem. I can see it's being really problematic on small lots, and I can see it as a huge disincentive on slightly larger lots. And it's just like it's just a hammer in for people with larger lots, in my opinion.
Snug Cove Periphery would, I think, be affected by this, with a lot of real good potential, you know, in the future, maybe distant future, to develop in a positive manner.
Yeah. Except I do like the idea that of the certainty of it, and I, you know, just repeating Daniel's thing is, if somebody brings forward an application that right on the face of it they're dedicating 50% to preservation, then that application is going to sail through, if I could put it that way. If somebody wants to be less than 50%, then they're going to have to show other considerations as to how they're protecting the environment or how they're furthering other desirable municipal policies, such as providing housing, affordable housing, and so on. I wonder if the way to get to it is to talk about the 50% as being aspirational rather than a requirement. You know, we would ask that they aim for the 50%, unless circumstances, some sort of language like that, 50%, unless circumstances make it an unreasonable requirement.
I think 50% is just too much altogether, but.
I think though of the recent developments on the island, and about at least half is set aside anyway. You know, some of it's kind of lucky, you know, Grafton Lake, right? You're not going to build anything on the water.
Well, I know, and they don't own the lake anyway. They just own the foreshore. So it really is a bit of a smoke and mirrors, which John's very good at.
I mean, I'd say the Grafton one, even outside of the lake, over 50% of the land is,
Wetland and it's
yeah,
restricted
but is
and
provided as park.
there's lots of
But-
creeks running through there and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But maybe some kind of qualifier on the 50% might, it may still never satisfy Kirsty, but it might be a reasonable thing to do.
So there seems to be 2 or 3 themes that are floating around. One is something about, should there be,
Can I share, Drew?
Sure.
See if we're matching.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yep. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, those were the same points I had in mind.
Yay.
Yeah, I would add something to the
please- Mhm.
second point, that not a requirement and may possibly be replaced with other amenity. And I might even be prepared to say, or not applied if to do so would be unreasonable, given.
So what about the Board of
unique
Variance language,
circumstances.
like hardship?
Well, I think unreasonable is a more,
Okay.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a lot. It sounds a bit subjective.
Well, no, actually unreasonable or reasonableness is a
Is it
concept
not?
used in law a lot,
Is it?
Oh, yeah, sure. The man on the Clapham omnibus, is it reasonable that this precaution be taken, that sort of thing.
Ah,
So,
I guess that's why I never made it into law school. couldn't distinguish.
yeah, what's reasonable? Well, yeah, there
Yeah,
are a lot of jokes about what's reasonable is
I'm
what the
sure.
judge had for breakfast.
I mean,
So the third-
It would be unreasonable to ask somebody to take a 1 acre parcel that has been scraped clean for a house, and then they have to provide parking and they have to this, that, you're not going to make them plant trees and restore the land or anything like that. That would clearly be unreasonable, right?
Yes.
well, and there's
It would-
also the issue of fire interface and the sensibleness of removing trees and scraping the land bare. Like it's you got to keep it mindful of other things than having trees.
But I think, isn't that part of the goal then of having sort of the target being clustered development? It is knowing the need for that.
Yeah, but how do you cluster on an acre?
Right.
What
Well,
I'm
build
on a
little tiny bed and breakfast units. Let me explain how that works.
You're allowed to have 2 of them now.
Yeah, that's right. 3's a cluster.
And clustering only works on some topographies.
I mean, what would be obviously unreasonable is if you ran up against another municipal requirement, such as parking or.
So say,
So unreasonable is good. Just leave it that way, I think. And that
Is
gives
this
council
language-
some. I'm still a little worried about Martin's comment. If they want to get rid of a politically sensitive development. But I don't know how we can protect against that. And I'm not sure, we don't have many projects like that on the island. I'm not likely to, right?
I don't think that would happen here.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it did.
we have ways of working around it as well. So
Yeah. Whoops.
And then on the second point about the second bullet, like to me, the whole issue of right now, what do we need on Bowen? We don't just need to protect trees and natural areas. What we really need to deal with is housing. and new forms of housing, more affordable housing, and it's an extremely difficult challenge. So if you come in with a proposal that is really going to make an enormous contribution in that area, but you're not able to protect 50% of the land, like nobody's going to say, well, we've got to stop this. I mean, it's the amenities that we're looking for. We're looking that when something is being rezoned and basically increased in value, that we share some of that value so that it's a contribution to the community. And you know, this is one aspect of that.
Okay, you know, maybe we could add after other amenity contributions, so it would be replaced with other amenity contributions which further other municipal policies. So that's the first step. And
Policies or priorities, strategic priorities?
priorities is better. Yeah, I like yeah. So that's the first thing. And then only if it doesn't work, then can we talk about it not applying at all.
Or that can have its own bullet?
I think it's part of that
Okay.
either or phrasing, right?
Placed.
No, maybe you're right, Steph. I'm gonna read it again. Maybe it's better to say that the policy not apply if the policy is inherently unreasonable.
So a new bullet or within this bullet?
What do you think, Michael?
I think within this bullet, because what we want to do is we want council to have a kind of triage. You know, if you have 50% set aside, great. You can't do 50%. Well, okay, you're now offering us affordable housing or whatever other, and oh, you can't do that either. Well, and you've got a good reason why you can't do that. Then that's the last resort. So I think it does.
Let's not say at all, because there may be a contribution of 25% or something plus two extra apartments.
So just one thing I'm not crazy about, although I don't get to vote, I don't like the word aspirational, because basically when you have aspirational goals, we all know, well, really, you're not going to achieve them. We're just sort of saying to be nice. And I'd rather we said, but as I said, I don't get to vote, that the 50% green space is stipulated as a goal.
Okay.
And may possibly be replaced, because that actually is what it says.
I won't support it at all then.
Okay.
Which is fine.
What
I
am
think
I
we're just
doing?
asked to comment.
Yeah.
Are we voting on this?
Yes.
Yeah, we should.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you so much, Councillor. Are there any voting members who have any opinions about the term that would be used here? Thank you so much.
Objective.
Ambition.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of.
Yeah, I have a huge problem with the 50% and aspirational. It reduces that to something that I won't say no to. I don't support it, but anyway, that's.
Oh, Steph, as a matter of minute take, I mean, do you record dissents?
Yeah, so we would, if there is, unfortunately, you guys are 4 of you. So it would take 3, however area it went, then we would write down dissent. We can split this up.
No, but I
Like
mean,
if you all agree on them, commercial use.
What I want to do is honor Kirsty's opinion, and you know, if she does turn out to be the dissenter, one of the comments is one member of the APC strongly opposed the 50%. I mean, council should know that, right?
Yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Kirsty has
And I'm
opposed
happy
before.
We don't even have to identify the person, just.
Well,
No,
I'm
we do
happy
have to.
Yeah.
It's our policy to identify the person. But sometimes if it's bulleted like this, then we're going to have 3 different, my practice is to identify what was the issue. So it'll be the 50%.
It's like if Kirsty supported the other 2 bullet points, then
Oh, I
you'd
see what you're
essentially,
saying
you'd
now,
essentially
okay.
vote on each of the bullets.
Okay,
Well, do you want to sever it like that?
well, what, no,
Well,
if
minor
the
changes
comment
that-
is that one member of the APC strongly opposed the 50% requirement, if you make that comment after the motion, assuming that it is going to pass, and you know how I'm going to vote. I don't know how Martin and Drew are.
I'm good with these 3. There may be a 4th.
Okay, well, if it's feeling like Kirsty's going to vote against, should we change the word aspirational then?
I think aspirational was the word that Kirsty supported.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so she's back in the fold.
Is that correct, Kirsty?
Yeah, I'll say that if it's David's aspiration, then, which it is, and I think, he came up with this 50%, and I don't agree with it, so aspirational slightly knocks it down. So I guess I could reluctantly support.
Does
Gotta be
anyone
hon-
have a problem with this minor changes of commercial use? I don't feel
Well,
like that's an industry term. Sorry.
Is it only commercial, or is it,
I
Is
think
it-
just changes of use.
Yeah.
I think the word commercial doesn't need to be in there.
yeah,
Is that right? The minor changes?
Of use.
Yeah.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And yeah.
Can I just bring up another
Mm-hmm.
viewpoint here? So maybe 4th point, maybe not. But could this policy, and do we care, be used to circumvent existing policies or requirements, municipal requirements? And I mean, maybe that's a question to Daniel.
Yeah. Did you have any?
Would it be
in
considered
mind?
as, well, I don't know, like other existing zoning regulations, for example? Could this be used as a tool to
relaxation of
relax
parking?
Yeah.
Not
Let's
as
say.
such. It would only come into play in a rezoning application. I mean, I could see it would shape a rezoning application potentially if you say, well, I'm going to dedicate, this is all park dedication, so the lots are going to be smaller, so I need a higher lot coverage on the existing lots.
Mhm.
Because now the lots are smaller, so to have the equivalent size building. But it wouldn't, negate you needing to meet other requirements unless, like, I guess through a rezoning, again, you'd be saying, well, I'm providing this, but I'm not meeting this other policy, and that I guess would be for council to weigh.
So basically, this would become a CD zone or something like that, comprehensive development zone.
Yeah.
Of its own defined.
Yeah, like an application would come forward to rezone, I guess, probably to a CD zone, and they would say, I'm meeting the policy, and so this will be my, and my lots will be smaller because of this, because I've clustered it more, so they're smaller with dedicated park or whatever it may be.
and you're saying that that's something that would be accepted.
Yeah, so somebody would say, well, rather than divide this 2-acre parcel into 2 1-acre parcels, we're going to follow the policy. They're going to be half-acre parcels, and with a 1-acre park, hypothetically. But then essentially we would rework potentially the lot coverage to say, okay, you still have, you're not then diminishing, what you could build on those lots. But treat them as if they're larger
like
lots.
setbacks changed or something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it does then, it would take more work, I guess, from the applicant to sort of sketch out, okay, the lots are going to be smaller. And so you need more certainty, I guess, to know that then the layout is going to work. But it's not, not insurmountable. And yeah, it might mean reduced setbacks depending how it all lays out.
So does the policy need to mention that?
Well, we're doing the rezoning
would-
and the rezoning.
Yeah, I think it would just be part of the rezoning. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Drew, I cut you off there.
No, that's okay. I realize that one of the points already covers it. It's just, as you were speaking, again, I can just see where, in the most simplistic sense, if you're in a rural area, you want to build a house, you have a house, you need a septic field, septic system, and you need to put in your own well. But you've got to give away half of your land, and suddenly you can't do all those three things on what's left of the land. But that's that hardship condition that we discussed, and then that would be triggered in this case. But it means for the developer understanding that in advance and not getting themselves shoehorned into a situation where suddenly they have created an undevelopable parcel for themselves because they were trying to comply with something else.
Right. But this could become a negotiation tactic.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
As
Yeah.
well. So not a hardship situation, but more of a voluntary trade of features, if you will.
Right.
Just to make it work.
Voluntary forced trade.
Well,
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like saying,
Well,
that,
it has to be fair to all sides, right? So
right. We had a look at it, and we realized that in order to meet the health requirements, to provide a well, to have a home, provide a well, and a wastewater treatment system on our property, we need a parcel this size. We can't give you 50%.
well, that's where the reasonableness provision
Right,
comes in.
exactly. We can give you 30%.
This is also going to the Environmental and Climate Action Committee, so.
Oh, good.
We don't have to be too green. They can do the green thing.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, they could do that then. Yeah, I think your previous point, Martin, is probably something that's dealt with directly in the rezoning process by staff and council. Is that what we're saying? So we're still staying with the 3 points we have?
Yeah, I'll share again.
yes. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Steph.
Did it share quickly this time?
Yes.
So do you feel like there's been robust discussion of the third bullet?
I think we all think it's a good idea, but acknowledge that it would be a very complicated project. But I think if we could get started on it. Oh, by the way, the word requirement got dropped in the second bullet.
Oh, where? No, it's here.
50% green space requirement. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, it just got put there.
Is that okay?
Okay. Yep, that's fine. Sorry, I missed it. But you know what? Somebody who's going to put a whole bunch of money up to buy a piece of land, what they want is certainty, and I think that's what both Martin and Kirsty are talking about.
Well, I'm not
If they do that mapping, then they'll know before they buy the land.
Right.
Well, to be fair, I'm talking from my own perspective. And I didn't buy the land. And taxes are such that we will have to subdivide and rezone. And I look at this and go, geez, this is pretty ugly. You can't afford the taxes. You can't afford to rezone. And it's a policy put in place that's going to prevent people managing their own assets.
Which is kind of what government does for a living.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, if you really do have a special case, Kirsty, surely council is going to be reasonable. And,
we already tried to come to council.
oh, okay. I guess I don't want to tread in those waters.
No.
And David, I think aspirational, you know what, I know what you're talking about is the policy wonks and all the rest of that, talk about it that way, but you know what, it's there. And I think people might hold council's feet to the fire sometimes. Is David still with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Oh, there
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah, I mean, I just see, it's okay. I don't just speak about it. You know what I'm talking about, but yeah.
I do. I've used it as an out a lot of times, but
Yeah,
we tried
right.
in good faith. Even.
How about provision instead of criterion?
Thank you. Sorry, Michael, I realized that you were right. It was odd.
So put that
I
in
really,
this.
I can't really see it on
Michael
YouTube.
was
I need
right.
to go back to my desk and, you know.
Okay, well, can I move all that then? Just to,
Ooh.
I think you can.
okay.
So we have a motion. Do we have a seconder?
Hmm.
Yes, Martin is going to second. All right. So let's call the question. All in favor? I can't quite see Kirsty. I think she half raised her hand and then,
I don't know. I guess
Then you-
so. I'm
Yes.
not, but
Now, Drew, you just say opposed and then we find out for sure.
are you opposed? I'm not opposed. I'm in favor.
okay, I'll say I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Great. Thank you all.
Hence.
Thank you for managing us through through this,
Yeah.
Michael and Drew.
Okay.
Sorry,
Great. So
I
we'll
heard my name, but I didn't hear the threat.
Yeah,
Oh, so thank you.
no, it was a thank you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. My goodness.
Not gonna come and get you.
Oh,
So item 5 on the agenda, I guess we move past the other items. I probably can't speak to it. It's a thank you, and it's about an election.
So I
So,
guess this is Drew's last meeting
oh.
after a million years
We can
Yeah,
all say
of
thank you.
leadership.
Thank you, Drew.
yes, thank
yeah, you're very welcome. It's been my
Wow.
pleasure, but been my pleasure working with you all as well. So, and I'm sure that our paths will cross in various ways. But yeah, and I truly hope that you get a few more folks on
There you
the
go.
commission,
I found it.
right? Thank you, Michael. I
Yeah,
hope we get a few more
Took
people
me a
on
while
the
to find it,
commission.
but there it is. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, because I feel like our numbers have dwindled to a point of it's and perhaps once we can meet in person again, things will pick up. I don't know. Hopefully. So a new chair and vice chair are needed. And
who's
that's
our vice chair now?
Another law you guys were breaking.
yeah, we've been a pretty radical bunch. We haven't had a vice chair.
Vice chair free. Yeah.
Why
So
don't we just nominate someone else quickly and then you just, there you go, it's off you.
I
Nominate yourself.
I would, my preference would be that the person who steps in for the to be the chair and the vice chair, or they want to do that. And I know I asked Michael at one point and he wasn't keen to. I don't know if that's changed. Perhaps it has.
With
Right.
this committee, unlike the other ones, it's very staff and
Well,
council.
okay,
driven.
I will volunteer as chair, but I will not run for an election. So if someone else wants to do it,
No, please, thank you. I think I'm not the right person on this subject to be the chair.
my only hesitation, I don't know as much about planning as I wish I did know, but I do know about running meetings.
Right. And I don't know anything about running meetings, so you'll be perfect. I don't know much about planning either.
Oh,
Well, no, I think that'd be great, Michael.
Thank you,
Martin?
Michael.
Yeah. Everybody here thinks that's a great idea.
I need a vice chair because I'm incredibly unreliable.
No, you're not.
Well, thanks.
So who would like to volunteer? It's down to two of you. It's an either or situation. Do either of you have an interest? Martin, sorry. Kirsty, you were about to say something?
Oh, no, I was, we're trying to have a vice chair now?
We are trying to have a vice chair now, yeah. Michael's being insistent.
Well,
Well,
it's
if I
actually
ever
for
have to do
Stephania's point,
I'll
you know, she
vice-
just needs, if I can't make a meeting, she needs to know who to.
Yes.
Well,
So we
I
need-
will volunteer if there's no one else, if Martin won't do it, so.
I'm happy to remain
Anonymous.
in this
Remain
chair.
quorum.
At large?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, great. Thank you, Kirsty. Michael, I think that's great. You'll be carrying the torch or whatever it is. Do you need something formal stuff? Or are you good with that?
I think I can do it by unanimous consent.
There we go. Let's go with the unanimous consent.
And is quorum 3 people? Now that Drew
Yes.
is, because I take it you're leaving the committee, not just the chairmanship.
Oh, sorry, without Drew, it would be 2 people. But
Quorum is
Um,
3?
You can, like,
Quorum is 2.
Oh, 2, okay.
so there might only be 2 people at meetings. That's a,
There might be. Which is why I'm
It'll
hoping
make
it's
for good conversation.
Yeah. My
we don't really
understanding
meet
is that
without everybody.
my understanding is there's a 15% of the island are new residents on the island. Surely there must be people who'd be
Yeah, I've
more
talked to-
than a little bit interested to be part of the advisory planning commission.
Yeah. Well, everybody, I've spoken to a few people because every time somebody will express an opinion about something that's happening on the land. And
Ah,
I say, great, you know, there's a committee where you can have an effect on that.
Yeah.
And suddenly they lose interest.
yeah,
They'd like to have their opinions, but
right.
actually having to be public about it and discuss it and think about it and meet people who might disagree with them. Or maybe they're
Yes.
just busy, I don't know.
Well, this is not helping my recruiting discussions.
That's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
thank you for that reminder email, Steph, because
Yeah.
somehow this didn't make it into my calendar
No.
after all that.
You're welcome. I'm sorry
Great.
about the calendar issue.
I think that's me.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll keep working on that. And so I guess I'm chairman now, and so I can thank Drew in my newfound capacity as chairman.
Indeed.
Drew, it's been fun working with you. I will say I love your even-handedness and your making sure everybody speaks, and you sure have taught me a lot.
Oh, thank you,
planning.
Michael.
So,
yes,
thank
I've certainly learned a lot. You may not believe it, but I have.
No, I do, Christine.
you. So then
That's great.
my next task as chairman is to entertain a motion to adjourn, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Indeed.
I'll do that.
Motion to adjourn does not require a seconder and no discussion is permitted. All in
That's
favor?
correct. Great.
That's one thing I do know about running meetings.
And that's absolutely true. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Good
Oh,
night.
are we likely to have more meetings, staff, or is council going into hiatus soon?
Now that Drew's gone? Yeah, no. That would be for council will go on end of July.
Yeah.
So
Oh, okay.
Council doesn't meet in August. I'm trying to think if I anticipate, like, it's possible I won't have anything the next couple council meetings. But I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay.
Summer holidays.
Have a great summer, everybody, then.